Hey, good Tuesday morning, everybody. Welcome into the Volquest podcast presented by our friends over at Exterior Home Solutions. If you have a need for a new garage, for siding, for roofing, for whatever the case may be, contact our friends over at Exterior Home Solutions. They're local and trusted since 1999. They'll get the job done right for you. A free consultation, a free estimate by picking up the phone, dialing 865-524-5888, or visiting our friends over at Exterior Home Solutions on exteriorhomesolutions.com. I'm Eric Kane with Rob Lewis, Austin Price, and Brent Hubbs. Got a lot to get into here today. First, let's take our discussions towards the night at Neyland and a certain 2026 quarterback that was the headliner, Austin Price.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can get the top quarterback in the country, Faison Brandon in here, it's a big deal. He's been to campus so many times over the last year. Mom and dad, great people, kids, super, classy kid. And he put on a show. I thought he performed really, really well. Kid can flat spin it. And, as we said here, early June of, going into his junior year, I think Tennessee's positioned best for him. Again, long way to go. But Tennessee has done a tremendous job here. He really likes Joey Halsley. He loves Josh Heupel, Mitch Militello, just the overall Tennessee staff. And they're very comfortable at Tennessee. And so, when you factor in that and the fact he's just now turned 16 during the night at Neyland, whereas you've got some other quarterbacks in that same class that are a year and a half to 2 years older than him, that are, older than some of the guys in the 25 class. It just says a lot about kind of where he is and where he could be when he gets to that same age.
Love this kid. I mean, I just, he's going to go be successful wherever he goes to college. You can some people just kind of ooze that factor, and he's so comfortable in his own skin. I think he's so level-headed because of his parents and the way they've gone about the whole process and where they are. He's just he's just a fun guy to talk to and be around. His parents are as well. That doesn't mean some other quarterback's not. And I'm just, a little biased here from the standpoint of, and spending time with them last year when they were at camp, and this year he's unchanged. Last year he was out getting offers. This year he's the number one quarterback in the class, according to some recruiting services. But they're unchanged about it. That's what you like about it. That, to me, that's what I like about him. I like everything about his game. I like who he is, and I like the way he's built and the way he's made up.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, you look right here at just the different rankings. I mean, he's number 2 quarterback overall. He's number 1 by On3, number 1 by 24/7. I don't know what Rivals is doing 14. I mean, I'm not saying you got to have him number 1, but come on, man. If there are 13 kids better than him, then this is the deepest quarterback class ever. So, hey. I just think that the kid's got some special qualities to him. And again, as Hub said, unchanged, which, I mean, listen, you start having everybody tell you how great you are and this and that. And as a 16-year-old kid, man, I'd have been, woo! Like this kid is like not changed at all. He's the same, intelligent, like well-mannered, smiles, polite kid that he was a year ago.
And hey, Hubbard, AP, just you guys on the topic that there was a little bit of chatter about this last week about Heupel's offense being gimmicky and it hurt with recruiting. I mean, I think that's been put to bed a little bit already. But when you see Nico on campus, George McIntyre committed, this young fella drifting through campus, Mike Matthews are here, the wide receivers that they're in on, in this upcoming class. Everybody, my point being, it seems to be like that narrative of, this offense, kids, they're going to be negatively recruited against because of this offense in the NFL and it's gimmicky. I mean, that seems to be like it has no teeth.
Yeah, I think the NFL game's going towards some of this stuff. Now the hash marks are different, but I think with the way the NFL's played, I mean, you're not lining up under center, you're not running counter tray and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's a spread out offensive game, that's designed to get the ball in space to people and let them go make a play, and it's designed for the quarterback to get it out of his hand fast. I mean, all the things that are the principles of what Josh Heupel does, what Josh Heupel's offense does, this is beyond the fundamentals of the game. But what he does is he uses the way the hash marks are set up in the college game to his advantage. that doesn't mean that's the only reason somebody in his offense is having success, in my opinion. Now, would it help him if Jerry Goff had not signed a gazillion-dollar extension and Hendon Hooker was going to get a chance to play? Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt having a quarterback be successful would help them there, because there's going to be some people continue to use that. But, I think Jalen Hyde will be better in year 2. I think Cedric Tillman's going to be better. He's got the kid that was at Buffalo that played for UCF, who had a really good year. I think he was a free agent, went somewhere else. So Darnell Wright's obviously starting. To your point, Rob, I do think the way the game has changed and the longevity now of Josh Heupel's offense, I don't think anybody's scared to draft a Josh Heupel offensive player. So I think it's a harder sell for schools to use that against recruits than maybe it was 5 years ago or 6 years ago.
Yeah, but they're still using it. I mean,
Sure they are.
But
they're using it. They're using stuff everywhere, right? I mean, how many people are telling Georgia receiver targets? You don't want to go there. They can get the ball to wide receivers. All their good receivers leave the program. You know, I mean, everybody uses everything.
No, 100%. I do think that, like, in talking to kids, I find that schools find more reasons to negative recruit Tennessee, though. It's more than just like, hey, it doesn't translate. Like, it's like they don't play freshmen. Like, I mean, like, there's all kinds of there's multiple things that these schools are telling kids. I think it's funny because, I mean, they negatively recruited Tennessee even when Tennessee wasn't very good. But it seems like there's more they said this, and this to counter your point, negative recruiter. Okay, well, what about this? like they come up with other reasons to negative recruit this staff for whatever reason, more so than the previous staffs.
I talked about this on on Monday's Locked On Vols. I mean, just kind of on that whole gimmicky offense. And
Shameless
plug. Help put food on the table. Josh Heupel, since he's been here at Tennessee, he's had 8 players on offense drafted. 8 just on offense, 2 quarterbacks, 2 offensive linemen, including a top 10 overall offensive lineman, 3 wide receivers, a running back. So pretty much every position on offense, excluding tight end and center. It's pretty good, especially at the quarterback position, where if you want to come to Tennessee, you're going to get an opportunity to get drafted. So, again, you score points, you win games, you're getting developed, and you're getting a chance in the NFL. I'm not sure how much of a case you have against that, Rob.
Well, and my biggest thing, Eric, and you mentioned, is the 2 quarterbacks, I mean, that were drafted. How many quarterbacks did Tennessee have drafted in the 20 years before Josh Heupel got here?
Exactly.
Am I missing one besides Tyler Bray?
Dobbs.
Yeah, I am missing one. And I apologize. That's an awful blank. So he had two in the previous 20 years, and both kids that have started for Heupel have been drafted.
So it's a silly and lazy argument, but it is out there. And when you're talking about headliners and, quarterbacks for the classes of 26, of course, like this past weekend and some other key positions, you might have to be, battling kind of against that at times. Austin, of course, you had Fajon Brown come in, but who else made some noise at the night of Neyland?
Well, I thought Tyree King was fantastic. The wide receiver from Knoxville Catholic, he's a 26. He put a couple of guys on skates. Even the one kid from, the Moon kid from Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, who, was a pretty good player, guarded him pretty well, and, he still was able to get past him. I mean, smooth, quick, agile, all the attributes you're looking for. He doesn't have that hair anymore, but, I think it's helped him aerodynamically. I mean, the kid again just continues to get better and better and better. He's got a good quarterback over there, Jaden Neal, to throw to him, which helps him as a high school receiver, to have good tape. So I would expect him to have a monster junior year coming up this fall. Carson Sneed, talented tight end. Hubbs, he continues to grow, man. Like, every time I see this kid, I'm like, could you get any bigger? I mean, like, he is massive and still moves like a tight end. I mean, he's built like a tackle, moves like a tight end. Kid's a really impressive kid. And again, grew up, as he told you last year, Brent, I suffered through the Dooley and Butch Jones eras. And so, I mean, like, when kids say stuff like that, you're like, good grief. Like, I mean, like, you just tattoo the T on your forehead. Why don't you?
Now he's going to camp at Auburn, Ole Miss, and Ohio State.
Sure he is.
But he obviously likes Tennessee a lot. Going to come back for multiple games this fall. Has put on about 20 pounds. So I think I've got to change that in the database. I think he's listed at 215 there, 218, something like that on her screen if you're watching on YouTube.
He was 240.
He's 242, somewhere in there, 240 right now. Still moves really well. I thought he was physical. He's trying to show everybody he's physical. He ran over about 5 DBs. I'm not sure that there wasn't a couple of offensive pass interferences in there a couple of times, but he wanted to make it clear he was more physical. And I think this is a guy that Tennessee coaching staff really likes a lot and should like a lot. I think there's a lot about his game that will translate well with what Tennessee likes to do with the tight ends. And I think he knew he had to get more physical and get stronger, and has put in the work to do that. He's a very different looking player than that profile picture that you see on your screen. And he was not going to pass up on the opportunity to camp inside Neyland Stadium. I'll put it that way.
AP, did he make the move to tight end here recently from offensive tackle, or has he always been a tight end?
He's always been a tight end.
Okay.
Yeah, always a tight end. Good player. Going to be a good college player.
So what's next? Obviously, we move on from night at Neyland. No official visitors this past weekend, AP, but you'll have, I believe, 6, and then of course backloaded towards the end of the month. It's about to get pretty busy.
Yeah, 6 official visitors as of now set up for this weekend. Headlined by Josh Petty. I like that. I think Petty's going to get a ton of love. He's not he doesn't slip through the cracks as one of 20 here a week from now or whatever that number is going to be. I think that's good for Josh Petty because you are playing a little bit of catch up. Florida State's, to me, the perceived favorite here. But again, I think a strong weekend in Knoxville gives Tennessee a real shot here. And again, 4 to 6 weeks ago, I would have told you they have no shot here because Tennessee wasn't doing it that much. And then, the both sides kind of reconvened and they've started to talk a lot more. And, I think Tennessee going into the weekend playing catch up, but with a strong weekend could be there with Florida State as a team to watch for Josh Petty. Again, he grew up a Tennessee fan, but that doesn't always translate to recruiting. At the end of the day, kids are going to go, where they feel like they fit best. It's not just as simple as like, Larry and Jimmy on the general's quarters. Yeah, they're Tennessee fans. Of course, they would die to play for Tennessee. This kid grew up a Tennessee fan, but he's still a kid. Like, it's not the same. You don't look at things. You look at things differently when you're 35 and 40 years old and when you're 17. So, again, Tennessee has a real shot this weekend with a strong weekend. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I thought you had an interesting post on the general's quarters, AP, on Sunday night, just about the patience that fans are going to need to have here and kind of the challenge that it is to weather the early storms. Now, Petty's an exception, as you just mentioned. He's coming in early, but it is backloaded, which as some people have told us, some kids have told us, that's probably a good thing for Tennessee's chances. But it also means you're going to lose momentum. People are going to draw even. There's going to be a lot written about somebody who's emerging as a new favorite when you've been the perceived favorite in it the whole time. Interesting first couple of weeks of June. Then it gets really fascinating and really critical for Tennessee to close. But you're just trying to survive the first 2 weeks is kind of what it feels like, AP.
Yeah, to put this in golf terms, somebody is teed off ahead of you in the final round, because I call this month of June the final round, and they've made birdies to take the lead. But you have a ton of holes to play. So now Tennessee's got to just go out and make birdies and retake the lead, right? Like Georgia made a huge move for Shady Hayward. Charles House, Alabama. Onis Konabani, Florida State. But they're all set to come here in the next 2 to 3 weeks. You have your chance to flip the momentum back. And so now that's good news for Tennessee. But the good news, the best news coming out of the weekend is like you didn't lose anybody that you truly covet to a commitment and that isn't going to take visits, right? Like, we talked about David Sanders, didn't see him shutting it down. Don't see Charles House shutting it down. He's going to Georgia this weekend, Tennessee next weekend. Same thing with, a lot of these kids. And so
Smith, the wide receiver that was in Georgia.
That's right. Smith's not done a lot of talking. So you always wonder, like, where's he at privately, right? But like Jalen Matthews, Tennessee had the most momentum with him. But again, he's taking visits. Rutgers this past weekend. He'll come to Tennessee next weekend. I think he's at Miami this weekend, and then Ole Miss to close. So and then we'll work to a decision after that. So you have, again, you've got to win your fair share in the month of June, which means you've got to have impressive official visits. Your staff has to, really, be on point. Now, the one caveat to that backload stuff we talked about is how do you balance having that many kids in here to where somebody feels like, I didn't get that much time with them, right? I mean, you look at, Onus Konabani, he goes to Florida State. He was the only visitor. So all the attention went to this one kid. Well, of course he's going to have a good time. I mean, it's hard to not have a good time on an official visit. But when you have all the attention on you, all of a sudden you're like, man, everybody's hanging out with me here. Well, there's nobody else there. So, how do you balance those last 2 weeks when you have so many kids here? And I think the biggest way to do that is have George McIntyre and a lot of these committed guys almost be de facto coaches and help you recruit. I know they're on their official visits too, but they need to be kind of ones that are kind of shepherding some of these uncommitted guys and making them feel the love.
Yep, I'm with you 100%.
We're going to get into some baseball talk here in a couple of minutes. Before we do that, I do want to spend just a couple of minutes kind of reaching in the bag here. We asked you guys a couple of weeks ago to send in some topics you'd like to hear on the podcast, some summer topics, and one of those was some interesting or fun recruiting stories. And, I mean, there's a lot that these guys probably can't say on the podcast, but I want to kind of go around the room and have you guys, put one out there. Rob Lewis, what is a unique recruiting story that comes to mind from the past for you in covering Tennessee football and, of course, basketball?
Oh, golly, man. Like AP, we were talking a little bit before, some of the best ones, I don't know that the statute of limitations has run out on or will run out on for some time. I mean, there's some innocuous ones. I mean, I know we've all had it happen. Like, you show up at the airport to interview someone, maybe it's, 6 a.m. and they don't want to talk, or their parents don't want them to talk. And, that's understandable. I've never really had anybody be rude to me, in that situation. But, I've had, some guys politely decline on a very early Sunday morning when you've gotten out of bed. Man, some of the ones really hover. Who was the kid that got snowed in here for ended up being 4 or 5 days on an official visit. Ended up going to either Clemson or Florida State. That was a really good player. First round, was it Lawrence Timmons? Is that blast for the Wayback Machine?
He was there. What I remember about Timmons was that one was so back and forth the night before that it was just it was the conversations. He was really torn on what to do and where to go, and he may have been here snowed in a little bit. I just remember that one the night before signing day. You're trying to get a grasp on where he's going, and that one was Tennessee and Florida State all night long till finally it's 1 a.m. and I'm going to bed. Just let me know tomorrow if you make a decision, because he went to bed.
I'm 90% sure it was him, and he got Tennessee thought it was to their advantage that he got snowed in. They had 3 extra days with him, and maybe after the fact it turned out that he was felt cooped up or something. But anyway, that was, and it wasn't that uncommon back in the day to have big time kids going into the last week still making weighing what they were going to do. That seems like a million years ago, however.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
night before signing day drama.
Yeah, it's just so different now than it used to be. And I'm not one of these, back in my day we had to walk uphill the snow and it was great. But I mean, AP, you covered it back in the day too. It was just different. I mean, now kids direct their own narrative, as they should. They have every right to do that. They can manage their own recruitment on social media. You're just trying to lay out a roadmap on where they're going, where they've been, what it means, that type of thing. But the kids are breaking their stories. But back in the day, man, you were calling secretaries. You were calling. I mean, the number of secretaries that leak stuff to me through the years that just to allow me to say, hey, Tennessee's in a great spot here, that you got from a school secretary 2 days before an announcement or a day before an announcement, was just, those things were huge. I mean, just somebody telling you, hey, yeah, you might want to come down for this announcement. and that's the secretary. That was all the hint that you needed, right? Get in the car and drive down there because it's going to, it's not going to be Kentucky. It's going to be Tennessee on the basketball front, and that type of thing. So, those stand out. I mean, I had a couple of wild ones. I mean, I broke 2 recruiting stories while guys were making food at work. And I'm the only one. I mean, I've told the story enough. There's some more people that know now, but there's really just a couple of us that know that Fred White worked at Little Caesars when he was in high school, because he was making a pizza when he committed. And Greg Jones was in Jonesboro, Arkansas, and he was working at Sonic. And his manager agreed to put him on the phone while he was making hamburgers to give me his Tennessee commitment, that he was committed to Tennessee. So we've all had those, and just where you get one in a rare spot or a bizarre place that you don't really anticipate getting because you're so desperate to get it. Back in the day, AP, you're just relentless. I mean, you're just relentless to try to get something. I mean, I called David Leverton to get his commitment, and Mark Bradley was sitting in the den. I mean, I talked to Mark Bradley when he was at David Leverton's house on the visit where David Leverton told Mark Bradley he was coming to Tennessee, which was kind of a bizarre deal too.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I would say, I'm not saying some kids don't work, but like, I don't know if many kids that come in now have real jobs like that.
No.
I mean, I just don't ever talk to kids that are like, yeah, I got to go work at the, talking to Byron Young when he was, at the Circle K. I mean, that was, to me, that's very much the exception. The rule now is, I mean, kids have got their graphics made by Hayes Fawcett and their videos made by, the school or whoever else. And, it's just a matter of, them, as you said, putting, they break their own news now. Nobody else really breaks it for them.
My best example of that from way back in the day when we still had dial-up connections almost was Ramon Foster. A young guy, at the time who I'd talked to a few times, and I just called to get an update like on a random Tuesday or Wednesday night and talked for a couple of seconds. Like, have you talked to Tennessee lately? He's like, oh yeah, I talked to Coach Fulber tonight. I just committed. Like, we're talking about a guy that played 12 years at the NFL. Today there'd be a high school gym and a webcast and 4 hats on the table, and Instagram Live. It's just so funny. Ramon at the time said, oh yeah, by the way, I talked to Coach Fulmer about 30 minutes ago. I committed. Inconceivable in this day and age.
The couple others that stood out to me now, then we'll get a break here, was Chris Donald was the first guy who ever gave me his commitment ahead of time. I convinced him to give it to me before he announced at the U.S. Army All-American game so I could turn a story loose as he put the hat on NBC. And I mean, it took like 2 weeks to convince him and his dad that it was okay, that I wasn't going to ruin the moment, that I was going to take care of him. But I knew there was no way, if I didn't have quotes, I couldn't write a story other than to say, hey, he put a hat on, because you couldn't pull video back then. You couldn't embed the announcement or anything like that. So you desperately had to have some quotes. So it took a lot of legwork to get them to agree to do that one. And so that was one that jumped out. And then Rodney Garner, for about 10 years, just snowed me on recruits. I thought Tennessee's got a great shot at this guy, and he had been committed to Georgia or Auburn for 6 weeks. He was the king of just having kids play out the string to the finish line, the absolute king of it. And I'd go on radio, yeah, I think Tennessee's got a great shot at this one. And then after the fact, I'd ask Rodney about it. Dude, that kid committed in December. He'd been committed for 7 weeks. I just told him to tell everybody to keep, just keep the heat off of him. Just keep riding out the string and doing it that way. Again, it's totally different than you do now. Everything that you do about it is totally different now.
These guys certainly have a lot more stories than I do, but before we transition, I have 2 examples, both of which are on the team, so I'm not going to say any names here. One of which is actually a story from someone who doesn't work for us anymore. I'll start with that one. Talk to the student athlete repeatedly, not just once, not just twice, but talk to him. And then one day reaches out to him and says, trying to get an update. And the player says, who is this? Acts like he didn't know who he was. Acts like he didn't have his phone number. And they had texted and talked on the phone several times. I thought that was hilarious. That kid's still currently on the team. And the other story for me would be just, I got yelled at by a mom in the airport one time, and we still see him in the walking through the complex, and we give him crap about it. But I mean, she was protective, obviously, but he was like, "Mom, I know him. We talked like, Mom, it's okay, it's okay." But like she was giving me the business for sure. So it was that was one that I will never ever forget.
I mean, I'm so old. I used to have to call neighbors and have them walk the cordless phone to the fence line to give it to a kid to talk to because
you interviewed Wilson.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. It's what it felt like. Jarris Jackson that played quarterback at Notre Dame.
I can't.
Hello, neighbor.
What was that? What was the convoluted? I can't remember all the details. I mean, I think there was a password and maybe some tin cans with a string involved. What all had to happen to talk to Albert Toeda? I can't remember. It was.
Oh no, that one was. I don't know.
He had a number of a friend of a guy who maybe he rode to class with or something. It was that one. That was a good one.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them out there. I was in Destin, Florida last week, and we're playing in the ocean, and some lady hears my voice. Here's me and my family talking, and everybody that's there, and she comes over and she goes, You're from the South, aren't you? You don't sound like a lot of these other people," talking about some of the northern people that were there. And like, "Yes, ma'am, I'm from Tennessee." And she said, "What part?" I said, "Knoxville." She goes, "Oh, I'm a closet Tennessee fan." I said, "What?" She goes, "Yeah." She goes, "I grew up and we live in Southwest Arkansas." And she grew up next door to Brett Smith. And so she knew Brett Smith and Rashawn Fellows and Ricardo Kemp and all that crew from Warren, Arkansas, because she worked at the school. And she remembered, talking about Tennessee coming in. We talked about how much Brett wouldn't talk in the recruiting process. And she was just funny. You just never know who you're going to run into. And there's another one that, I mean, he had everybody all over the map on what he was doing because there's so much pressure on him to go to Arkansas. And he just shut down. I mean, he just didn't talk to anybody. And he didn't talk to anybody when he was at Tennessee for 4 years. So that's kind of his personality, I guess.
I can remember calling, and I'm sure you did it too, calling Coach Hugh Freeze to talk to Michael Orr, for recruiting updates, 100 years ago.
I remember that walkthrough where the Tuohys took Michael Orr away from Tennessee's walkthrough and put him in the car and took him to Oxford for the Ole Miss walkthrough before Tennessee and Ole Miss played that next day.
I remember Tennessee was recruiting the white wing player from Memphis, and
Austin Nichols.
I can't get this kid on the phone, AP. If you can get him on the phone, I'll get you Ruth's Chris. I text the kid. Now maybe it was Nichols, I don't remember. And I said, "Hey, my buddy says I'll get a Ruth's Chris gift card if you call me and do a quick interview with me." Kid called like that, and I was like, "Thank you, buddy." Rob the quotes. Rob sent me the Ruth's Chris gift card. Not doing business with you, RL.
And I think that was Austin Nichols. It might have been somebody different, but I think that was Austin Nichols.
Plenty of stories out there. Of course, these guys could probably go on for the next hour or so. Maybe that's what we should do one day here in the summer, but we do need to move on to
the statute of limitations are gone. When a kid's out of school, I will tell stories. I will, and a lot of these ones the last few years are pretty good. But again, we got to get some of these kids out of here first. And I really, honestly, because you sent this like an hour beforehand, like I need to go back and just look through recruiting classes at names and go, okay, I remember this, that. You know what I mean? Like
100%. I mean, like I wrote the story last week about the basketball transfers. I mean, just when you go back and look at the rosters on every year, I mean, when you go back far enough, at least 8-10 years, you're like, man, I forgot all about that guy. I mean, if you'd asked me on a Jeopardy type situation, if Chris Darrington ever played for Tennessee, I'd been like, who are you talking about?
Well, hey, Rob, not at Neyland. Guess who I stood and talked to whose kid was going through camp?
I bet the father of somebody who was a recruit at some point in time and who now has a recruit himself, I bet.
His kid is a rising freshman. He lives in Tampa, Florida now, and it's the pride of Philadelphia, Martin Jones.
Oh, wow.
Martin Jones looks exactly like he looked when he arrived on campus
I saw him
as a college freshman.
He was there Sunday, too.
Looks exactly the same.
Underrated Vol. For another topic, underrated Vol. That dude.
Good player.
I mean, did everything.
If that guy would have been a little taller, that guy would have played a long time because he could play the game of football. His size worked against him. Sorry, Eric. We
And
gotta
probably
move on. I know.
would probably be better off now just because he was so multi-positional. I mean, he could
Yeah.
play everywhere.
Yeah, the game would be good for him now.
Good stuff. We'll have to come back and do this again later on in the summer and prepare a little bit more, but some good stories there, and appreciate the topic subject from the GQ for sure. Let's talk a little baseball. Tennessee baseball still playing on to Super Regionals for the 4th straight year, 6th time in program history, the 7th regional championship win this past weekend. That's coming up next. We continue on here with a Tuesday edition of the Volquest podcast presented by our friends over at Exterior Home Solutions.
Severe weather can strike at any time in East Tennessee, and Mother Nature can do severe damage to the first and most important line of defense that you and your family have against Mother Nature, and that is your roof. Whenever she strikes, make sure that you call the people that I call. Make sure you trust the people that I trust, and that's my friends at Exterior Home Solutions, because they're more than friends, they're truly family.
The top seed in the college baseball regionals and the college postseason play advanced with ease, Eric Kane, over the weekend. Regional play is challenging. Regional play can be hard. We saw that a lot of Friday night and a lot of opening games that took place around the country with top seeds falling and having to work their way through the losers bracket. Tennessee's toughness on full display. I mean, their maturity and on toughness was on full display. That's my biggest takeaway from the weekend is they just left no doubt. What's your takeaway from Tennessee's sort of not really challenged weekend in regional play to get to the super regionals?
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't think Tennessee played bad this weekend at all, so don't hear me wrong. I don't think that they played sloppy and bad baseball, but I don't think they played their best baseball this weekend. And I mean, look at the final scores. I know what Tony Vitello says. He's going to respect his opponent, and that's great. Tennessee cruised. Tennessee absolutely cruised through regional play. Was not challenged. And this is after taking, the first batter of the regional for Tennessee. Took you deep, and Tennessee had to respond. But they just looked like the number one team in the country, by a country mile as well. I mean, you had guys step up on the mound. What A.J. Causey did on Friday was incredible. Thought Xander Seacrest showed some serious grit on Sunday, and if Nate Snead did what he did, and some guys behind Drew Beam picked him up. The lineup, you saw Cal Stark kind of pull away a little bit. Dean Curley swinging a hot bat. Hunter Inslee, Dylan Dreiling. I mean, you can go up and down this lineup. Kavar Steers. Guys stepped up, and guys played really, really well, and again, wasn't really even challenged. And you look around the country, and, Arkansas's not done. Arkansas's done playing now. South Carolina's done playing now and looking for a head coach. Mississippi State is done playing now.
Vanderbilt's at home.
Yeah, Vanderbilt is at home. Wake Forest over in the Greenville Regional. Everybody wanted Tennessee and Wake Forest. Wake Forest is, they were 0-2 and done.
Arizona.
Yeah, so I mean, you can never predict what regional play and what postseason baseball is going to be, but man, Tennessee looked good this weekend and on to supers once again for the 4th straight year under Tony Vitello.
Do you think some people believe that, the regional play changes because people aren't playing the same team? It's different. It's teams you haven't seen all year. So you're seeing different pitching. There's not as big of a book on the hitters and those types of things. I mean, how much does that play into an advantage for Tennessee? They're obviously a good hitting team. They've hit the baseball well all year long. They set a record for home runs. But how much better is it for them at the plate when you're playing an unknown team?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it hurts, certainly. Everybody around the country, to your point, knows who Tennessee is. Can look up the stats and see Tennessee leads the nation in home runs and, is top 30 in batting average and so on and so forth. So it's a really, really good team. But when you're not playing, this team for a weekend series throughout the year, in Vanderbilt's case, not playing this team 5 times throughout the season, you don't exactly know each and every little quirk that can show up on a scouting report or that can show up on tape repeatedly. So I do think that helps, Tennessee. And, Tony Vitello says this all the time. I mean, and truly, for any other team in the country, for most teams in the country, I think he's completely right. You can flip this, order, really. And, the bottom third in the order for Tennessee's order, good hit in the heart of the order of a lot of other teams around the country. And it's just kind of that good. There's not a lot of glaring weaknesses outside of the designated hitter position for Tennessee in this lineup. So I do think that can help a little bit. These teams don't face Tennessee too often, and of course they get a massive rude awakening when they do.
Well, and playing at home certainly helps as well.
Yeah.
I do think, and AP Rob jump in here. I do think it's unusual that they do not have a traditional batting lineup. That it's. I mean, they could flip it if they want to, but I mean, their best hitter is, Christian Moore is a leadoff guy.
That's where the games went to.
You think everybody's doing that? I mean, you think
Look
it's
at
more
Tommy
that way?
Tanks. But Tommy Tanks led for LSU. I mean, I think that's how it's going because it's become almost like a softball model, post Slapper era, where you want to try to get, Christian Moore that fifth at bat, or if you're hitting the ball well, that sixth at bat. Same thing with Blake Burke. So I think getting them to the back to the front, and as pointed out in the broadcast over, you only lead off the one time. Every other time you come to the plate, you're not the leadoff guy.
That's true.
Well, the more unless the 9-hole guy gets out last. I mean,
Right.
So, I mean, like you only lead off the one time.
To me, as somebody, I was going to say, Eric. I mean, you follow it. You're inside baseball on it, and analytics and everybody. But, somebody who watches it close, but just way more casually than you. That's what jumps out to me is the depth of hitting up and down the lineup. When you see Cal Stark hit 2 bombs last night and put one over the porch. I mean that just highlights what you're talking about. And again, you've got all the numbers and whatnot, but just as some big picture, look from the outside looking in, that to me is what jumps out at. It's not 2, 3, 4 guys. I mean, how many guys could hit 20 on this team? I know you got that one. I mean, if they played 2 more weeks.
A couple. I mean, so you got Christian Moore that's about to be at 30. He's at 29. You've got Billy Amick who's at 21. Dylan Dreiling, I believe, is at 18 or 19. Burke and Tiers are at 18 or 17. I mean
that's crazy. Those are crazy numbers.
Yeah, and you got to cut. I think I got in the home run story I wrote Sunday night, but Tennessee's got 6 players who have 10 or more home runs, 2 that have 20 or more, so on and so forth. You have Hunter Ensley and now Cal Stark, who are sitting at 9 home runs. So theoretically, Rob, 7 players in the everyday lineup could have double-digit home runs here in the next couple of games, which is just incredible. This lineup is awesome. And then going back to the SEMO thing and the leadoff, I think you're seeing more and more. If you're not hitting leadoff, you're hitting second. Jack Caglione at Florida hits second. Charlie Condon, I believe hits second for Georgia. So a lot of those premier bats in the order are either hitting leadoff or second in the order. But Tennessee's had Kavaris Tiers hit cleanup, Dylan Dreiling hit cleanup. Blake Burke and Billy Amick has pretty much been the 2-3 options all year long. They've tried to do some things with SEMO before they settled him into the leadoff. But even Tony the other night said, Christian Moore is not a leadoff hitter. He's just hitting leadoff for us. You can do a lot of different things with this lineup, but when you're getting production from the bottom third, the middle of the bottom third carried Tennessee on Sunday. The first 3 hitters, went like 1 for 14 or something in that clinching game. It just goes to show you how good this Tennessee team is, and they'll be challenged. At the time of this recording, of course, we'll see if it's ECU or Evansville. They'll be challenging supers, no doubt. But I mean, Tennessee's the number 1 team in the country for a reason, and man, they played like it, despite not even playing their best baseball, in my opinion, this past weekend.
I think I got one point to make about one player, but I think the one thing you got going for you, Eric, is what happened 2 years ago. As the number 1 seed, the dominant team. Now, Tennessee's not nearly as dominant this year statistically overall as they were in 22. There was just so much, and even though they broke that home run record that they set in 22, it just doesn't have the same feel because there's not as much, bravado. There's still bravado. Christian Moore carries plenty of it, but it's just not as much across the whole lineup. But I mean, I think that helps them going into next weekend because Tony can point to that. Look at that group 2 years ago, man. Look at what they did. They went home, and this group seems so focused. But I want to give a big shout out to Billy Amick. That dude missed 2.5 weeks. He's got 21 home runs. Before Christian Moore obliterated the record this year, Tennessee's single season home run record was 24. I mean, you're talking about if you don't miss 2.5 weeks, you're probably right there on what would be a historic season for Tennessee baseball. I mean, that kid has, his batting averages went down from Clemson, but everything else has been spectacular. He's still got to work on fielding at the next level. A lot of guys got to work on that. Look, I mean, dude, who thought Blake Burke and Christian Moore would become the defenders?
Christian Moore's glove this weekend? Goodness gracious, man.
And Blake Burke he's become Luke Lipsius over there with that big mitt. And, last year was not.
Yeah.
My one captain obvious observation as we get out is just it jumped out to me against Southern Miss late is if in this format with the regional super regionals, if Tennessee's playing somebody, if Tennessee can stay in the winners bracket and they're playing somebody in that elimination game on Sunday, that somebody's playing their fourth game in 3 days, those bats, that lineup is just, I mean, wears on that. I mean, Southern Miss's pitching staff, they were on fumes late in that game. And that is, it's not a criticism of Southern Miss. I'd say just about any college team would be in that situation playing, the fourth in 3 days and facing the lineup that Tennessee can throw out at you.
And that was with the first 3 batters doing nothing, Hubs.
Yeah. I mean, the quote stars at the plate for you didn't do anything because the bottom of the order took care of business. And that's my biggest takeaway. And I go back to something Tony Vitello told me back in, I guess, March, early March, mid-March. We had him on Vol Calls and I asked him, what have you learned about your team? Because they played that early tough tournament deal out in Texas. And, all right, what do you know about your team? And he said, you know what? He goes, I think we're a lot tougher than I thought we would be. We're a lot more mentally tough than I thought we would be. And you look at this team, and to me, Eric, that's what stands out, not from the standpoint of, man, they've just had to, there's been so much adversity, but the chemistry and the maturity and the toughness of this team, they got down to Southern Miss and it didn't matter. Like all right, next inning, we'll get this back. We're good. Like there was no flinch there. But then you have a guy like Hunter Inslee, who had a really good year a year ago. He struggled some this year, in and out of the lineup. It didn't go exactly how he had it according to script. Never became a problem. Wasn't an issue. You got guys who, listen, some of these guys don't like to be called, they want to be starters, right? You're a weekend starter guy, and you just call them the first guy out there to pitch, whatever that is. You know what I mean? That, they may get 3 innings, and they're okay with that. This team is not as good as 2 years ago. It feels like this team has more cohesiveness than 2 years ago. What does that mean? I don't know, Eric, but it does feel like this team has better chemistry than 2 years ago. And not that 2 years ago was a problem, but there was so much bravado on that team, you kind of wondered about it. This team seems a little more workmanlike. And I think Tony Vitello's enjoyed coaching this team as a result.
Yeah, he definitely has. I mean, you can tell. I mean, he just lights up talking about this team. I mean, he lights up talking about those teams in the past and Drew Gilbert and Luke Lipsius and, Ferguson and Spence, all those guys. But you can just tell he's enjoying, what he's doing right now because you see guys who grow up and not only are doing it on the field, but doing it in the locker room and leading this team. Guys like Blake Burke and Christian Moore, who he brings up all the time. We wouldn't have said that about Christian Moore 2 years ago. We wouldn't have said that about Christian Moore last year. It's maturity. He's grown significantly off the field. And, Hunter Inslee as well. Quick note about Hunter Inslee, entering game 3 at Florida at the beginning of May. He was hitting like 239, 240, something like that. Dude's hitting like 290 right now. He was the second best hitter in SEC play last year. There's a reason why they never gave up on him, and It's paying off right now. But yeah, and Tony said this on Sunday night. He's like, a lot of these teams in 21 and 22, we're getting this new stadium. It's because of them. They're paving the way, making it easier for this team, and this team can see what happened there. And a lot of these guys were on the team in 2022, learn from it and move on. Now, 2022 was great. They were hard workers. They were flashy. They were dynamic. I think that they were really, really good at what they did. And it's not like they weren't mature, but I do think that there's a maturity about this team. It's just lunch pail and bucket. They just go to work and they enjoy doing it. And it's not as dominant. It's a little bit more, it's not as dynamic, I guess, but it works. And it's working in a big way with how they've assembled their arms and some guys who have stepped up in the bullpen and kind of their plan. Tennessee went according to script exactly this weekend and dominated. Yeah. And so will it be that easy in Supers? Probably not. If you go to Omaha, will it be that easy? Certainly won't, but they're good enough to do it all. So we'll see what happens, Brent. It was a really, really good weekend for Tennessee, and they'll be playing baseball again. The final couple of games in the press box at Lindsey Nelson Stadium before that sucker comes down. I'll have a story on that over at Volquest when the crane hits that press box. Can't wait for that.
Yeah, that was coming soon when that's over, but there's more baseball to play, and we'll have full coverage of everything this week leading up to the Super Regionals for Tennessee as they get to play at home, and it should be an unbelievable crowd, and it should be a great opportunity for Tennessee. Recruiting never stops. Camps are going on. We'll have updates. Matt Ray and Austin have a ton of stuff coming up in recruiting. Continued stuff with basketball, continued stuff with all season with the football team as well. There's plenty of things happening right now at Volquest, and there's no better time to check us out and to take part and be a part of the Volquest family. If you're watching on YouTube, special promo deal is available for you there, a couple of months for $1. Use the promo code you see on the screen there and check it out. We certainly appreciate you watching on YouTube. Subscribe, like, all those things that you do. But more importantly, come be a part of the family with us and interact with us, have great conversation, talk a lot of Tennessee athletics, and maybe get a restaurant recommendation or a time or two out there as well this off season as everybody hits the vacation trail. But it's a great place to hang out on the General's Quarters, so be sure and do that. That's going to do it for this edition of the Volquest.com podcast presented by our good friends at Exterior Home Solutions. For Rob Lewis, Austin Price, and Eric Kane, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody.